Act 1. The King of Smoldering Ruins. Part 1. What does smoldering mean? Hello and welcome back to episode number 2 of Shikkoku no Sharnoth. I think I already mentioned it in the last episode, but I really like the setting. 1905 London, post-Victorian London. That's really nice. It almost feels kinda nostalgic. Although I didn't live at that time. Maybe I did in a previous life or something. But it didn't feel like that to Mary. She had only vague memories of the 20th century parade sponsored by her highest, the great Queen Victoria. She was once told that the city, London, the capital of the great British Empire, had much worse smog than it used to after the sudden rise of steam engine factories. Her childhood memories were faint. She couldn't remember how much smog there was back then. When her mother transferred to Kadath? Where's that? She came to live in the city again in order to study at the Royal College. I wonder if Kadath is mentioned in some of the other steampunk games from Liosoft. London, the city of fog and steam, the greatest city in Europe, where progressive exchange with Kadath caused an engine revolution. Most of the people of London thought Queen Victoria's rule would be eternal, and that felt true to Mary. The promised city of prosperity, the most engineered city in Europe and in the world. The airships used to trade with Kadath flew across the East End sky, never stopping day or night. Oh, so there are airships flying around. The music kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy XII. That thing? Queen Victoria Street, a lively and gorgeous thoroughfare. When you talk about the square mile, most people usually think of this huge street and St. Paul's Cathedral, and maybe the third London Bridge. Mary was no different when she entered the college. She couldn't remember the city's layout from her childhood. She had no idea where most of the names came from. It was only recently she learned the differences between the London Bridge and the Tower Bridge. Such as scholars from Kadath remodeling the London Bridge with engine machines, and there being 4 Tower Bridges instead of 3. It might be possible to see the second London Bridge from this street, maybe even Big Ben if one was high enough. Mary was now used to gazing at the city's sights. She could even say with pride that it was her city. Getting from her lodging house to here took roughly 15 minutes using tall gurneys or the underground. What are gurneys? It felt completely different from Holborn, where her lodging house was located, partly because of the crowds and partly because of all the engine motor cars and carriages going every which way. But the sky was the same. That was why Mary could call it her city. Why are you using a parasol? It's not raining, is it? And there's no sun shining, so why would you use a parasol? Probably as an accessory or something. The amount of soot in the air was the same as usual, but today's sunlight was sparse, even though there used to be no such thing. Huh? Oh, so there used to be no sunlight? Why is that? It's almost like Inganok. That thing in the sky. That thing. Those gaps in the sky. Shouldn't they be impossible to see? They are much too far from here. Gaps in the sky? Covent Garden? Where's this? Okay. What kind of place is Holborn? Is it a place inside London or outside of London? Bargains? Maybe it's a market. Oh, why is that? Oh, really? I kinda don't believe that. You're a woman after all. It was true that Charlie never lied, but Mary wasn't satisfied. She tilted her head. Did jokes not count as lies? As she thought about that. Well, most of the time, jokes actually aren't lies. Suddenly, who's she spotting? Who's that? She thought a tall body in military uniform entered her vision, someone tall and slender. Very thin for a man, but still very tall. In the corner of her mind, she thought he was a beautiful person. Maybe it's a reverse trap. She casually glanced in his direction, and their eyes met. At first, she thought she was imagining things, but those eyes kept following Mary as she walked. That person stood still like a statue, gazing intently at her, at Mary. She instinctively gulped. The gaze was firm. Mary stopped, feeling that something was wrong. She was being watched? Why? Was she the sort of person who would attract military attention? She started to think that, but then realized. So he's interested in a golden eye? Wait, yeah. The moment she thought that, the person disappeared into the crowd. She tried to follow him with her eyes, but strangely enough, she couldn't see him at all. Even if she stood at her tiptoes, she couldn't see the person anywhere. Maybe you're just paranoid. She thought she'd whispered quietly to herself, but Charlie was right next to her. A woman? So it really was a reverse trap. What is Adaism?
この絵ではなくて陸軍服ね。それでもすごいけれど。陸軍？でもほら、バッキンガムの。この絵と陸軍さんの服ってよく似ているの。ちょっと見ると同じみたいに。でもここで見られるなんて不思議。この辺りに兵隊さんの施設あったかしら。どうかしら。
She didn't think she'd seen soldiers beyond Buckingham Palace, except during parades. Charlie said it was an army uniform, but that didn't mean much to Mary. The army didn't feel all that real to her. She had heard that the number of veterans in the city had increased after the war in India, but... Oh, there wasn't a war in India? Moody's? Moody's. When Mary first came here, she thought it was St. Pancras, otherwise known as the British Museum. Charlie showed her around, just like she was doing today. Back then, Angie was with them too. She was surprised to hear it was privately operated and that it was a massive rental library. She almost felt like gasping. Moody's Select Library. Gentlemen, ladies and every sort of middle and upper class persons gathered here quietly. The quiet part was just like a library. So was looking for the books she wanted. Yeah? The quiet part was just like a library. So was looking for the books she wanted. Is that right? The difference was it cost a little money, but it was still cheaper than buying it on her own. Even as a student of the Royal College of Scholars, she wasn't a noblewoman, so she couldn't buy that many books at once. That was why this place was so nice. It was quiet, had an air of elegance, and was quite comfortable. Charlie said Covent Garden was much the same as this place or Harrods, but somehow it didn't feel true.
Mary はここが本当に好きね。そんなに目を輝かせて。そうかしら。そんなことないけど。フランケンシュタインの初版を見つけた時なんて大変だったわね。
Frankenstein? She wasn't a bookworm or anything, but she couldn't stop her heart from fluttering when she found a rare book. Sometimes she even made noises. But only sometimes. She didn't always cause a commotion. She tried whispering to herself on the inside. This is what? Terror of Iron Jack? When she looked up, she saw a lady being attacked by a monster made of metal. Golden Goblin Press, huh? When she... What? A poster from an ancient-type printing press. She'd seen a lot of posters for horror stories lately. It must have been because of those rumors. She thought it was just a bad taste, but even though she got shivers and wanted to look away. Her eyes were drawn into it, even though she didn't like scary pictures. She looked at the letters on the poster. It said it depicted events in a recent horror story called Terror of Iron Jack. She knew that book. She had read it out of curiosity a month ago. It had something to do with the anger of executed criminals materializing and attacking people. There was only one author classified as horror fiction that Mary could read. Mary Shelley. Was that a real person? Only the books of the female novelist bearing the same name as her. Many people called her books horror stories, but Mary didn't think they were. She couldn't help but feel those books were love stories.
Mary?
She hurriedly averted her gaze, but she was sure she noticed.
苦手なものをどうして見ちゃうのかしら。怖いのがいいの？苦手なもの好き？違うの。そういうわけじゃなくって。
As she looked away, she moved towards the bird's lay corner as if fleeing. She looked into it and felt a little relieved. There weren't many gentlemen there today. Almost everyone there was a girl around her age. Many of them probably didn't want their parents finding out. Birdslay's pictures were charming, but also very, well, stimulating. She looked through the girls at the shelf with the most recent books. There weren't any of the new arrivals shelf this month, but there could be some here.
どう？新作ある？
She looked over the whole shelf through the crowd, not getting her hopes up. After making a full turn, she shrugged her shoulders slightly.
ないわ。貸し出し中みたい。じゃあ、取り寄せてあげましょうか。小さな本屋さんにね、知り合いがいるの。私のエンジンカードなら、多分問屋さんにもコネクトできるから。
What is an engine card? She thought a little, then she shook her head.
いいわ。問屋さんのエンジンライブラリにログ残せない。
Is the engine card some kind of credit card?
そう？そうなの。いいことシャーリー。もうお嬢様って自覚をしなさい。
She may not have been an aristocrat, but Charlie was a lady from a good family. She couldn't have her name in the purchase record for Bardsley's new book. It may not be a scandal, but if the Brontes found out, it would be terrible.
はーい。ごめんなさいね。気がつかないお姉さんで。半年だけだけどね。そうね。半年だけね。
How old are both of them anyway? Probably 18. Then, the sort of bells informed us of the time. The bells of the second St. Paul's Cathedral rang. The sound of bells telling the time of 2 p.m. 1 hour had passed since they had entered Moody's. Which meant...
まあ、もうこんな時間？いけない。午後の講義始まっちゃう。
Oh no! Let's hurry. Oh, is this their school? The Royal College lay between several planted trees, a short way beyond Queen Victoria Street. For example, if one were at the entrance to Moody's when the bells began to chime on the hour, then a young woman running, she could reach it and only be 20 minutes late. That's roughly how far away it was.
公立石学院。ここが私たちの通う学び屋。
A scholar training facility consisting of a lecture building and a research building. Unlike a university, it didn't require tuition, fees, and was managed by the royal family. A place to protect and nurture skilled young minds, so that one day they could become scholars who would contribute to the growth of the state and the royal family. Anyway, there were good reasons for it to exist, but most students thought of it like this. A garden where girls were allowed to study by such good fortune. It was almost like divine providence. The large number of female students was another difference from normal university. Although the male students specializing in the so-called sublime pursuit of mathematics still vastly outnumbered them. Even now, as she hurried into the plaza before the lecture building, trying to reach her lecture on time, most of the students passing through were boys. Oh, this is Angie, huh? She's kinda cute, I guess.
あら。もう、どこ行ってたのさ。海外文学の講義、もう始まっちゃうよ。
What's with that frown?
エンジンフォンにも出てくれないし。
Oh, they have telephones.
また二人で遊んでたんでしょ。
Did they already had telephones at that age? At that time?
ごめんなさい、アーシェ。遅くなって。アーシェも私学科にすればよかったな。ごめんなさいね。でも転科はダメよ。あなたには数学の才能があるのだから。数学は嫌いじゃないけど、教授も同級生も男子ばっかりだし。
Oh, you don't like men?
わがまま言わないの。埋め合わせはちゃんとするからね。おお。小さく頬を膨らませるお嬢様。かわいいかわいいアーシェリカ。アーシェリカ・ダレス。私の生涯における2人目のシーン。
Angelica Darleth. Huh. Every student at the college knew Angie's Shins, since she was part of the Darleth house of English aristocrats. Even though the Darleth house fell into ruin long ago, that's only relative to the golden age of aristocrats. They were still an impressively well-known family. Though because of Angie's temperament, not many students or lecturers saw her as a noble woman. Lively, cheerful, loved by everyone. Including Mary, of course, as well as Charlie.
ねえ、アーシェ。もし週末の予定が空いてるなら、みんなでハロッツへ買い物に行かない？ 3人で？そう、3人で。ミスター・ハワードがいてもよくってよ。
Who was Mr. Howard again? Oh, a boyfriend or something?
3人でハワードとはいつでも会えるもんね。かわいそうなミスター・ハワード。なんでもないわ。じゃあ約束ね。3人でハロッツ。
Angie bounced between several different expressions. Mary loved her that way, and it went without saying that Charlie did too. Even at this moment, Charlie was gazing at their smiles. Smiling softly, like a mother, like an older sister.
だから私は気づかない。
You didn't notice what?
今日に起きる何もかもがいつも同じだと思っていたから。いつもの金曜と同じだと思っていたから。
Oh, will something special happen today? Mary did notice the moment when Charlie's face stiffened. That change was brought about by a certain man's voice, a middle-aged man calling to her from behind. A rational voice, it was calm and gave the impression of profound knowledge. The words had a noticeable accent, undoubtedly because he was foreign. The college gathers scholars from every corner of Europe.
Oh yeah.
Čapek? Maybe he's from Poland or...
始業ベルは鳴り終えてしまったはずだが、この時間の講義を取ってはいないのかな。シャーロット・ブロンテ君。
I guess he's from Eastern Europe. A man speaking in an Eastern Europe accent. His name was Josef Čapek. He was one of the great many professors invited to London's Royal College of Scholars. He was a scholar studying sociology and ancient science. There were a lot of strange people working in the Royal College, but he was especially odd. With religious zeal, he carried the same bag around with him everywhere. Some girls referred to him as the teacher with a bag.
博士。ごきげんよう、チャペック博士。所用で2人を待たせてしまったんです。
She was already defending Mary and Angie, even though they should have taken the fall together at times like this. Mary thought about saying something herself, but when she saw Angie about to do the same thing, she changed her mind. They'd be indebted to her now, but it was still best not to interrupt.
珍しいこともある。君が講義を欠席するとね。
It's almost like they're kind of scared of him.
よくできた才女には程遠いですから、そういうことも多々あるんです。
君の冗談を聞くのも珍しい。さて、まあ他の教員の講義などを私はあまり気にするものではないのだがね。声をかけたのは咎めるためではないよ。先週提出されたレポートについてね。
調査不足は自覚しています。お見汚しを失礼しました。次はもっと文献を取り寄せて。
いや。
There was no malice or ill intent in the professor's tone of voice, but there was something. For some reason, Mary felt there was something, as if he was withholding something he wanted to say.
エンジンマシンと労働の社会的意義について、君ほど冷静な視点で評価できる学生など、そうはあるまい。君には期待している。やはり君という存在は優秀だ。期待しているよ。
ありがとうございます。あれ？気づいた今、シャーリーの表情がかけるところ。こんな顔をするだなんて、私は驚いて硬直しかけてしまう。
What's going on between them, I wonder? Always kind, always gentle. Charlie's expression was always like that, but Mary didn't miss it the second time. Her second face and low voice right after the professor emphasized excellent.
なぜ
Her heart quivers, seeing Charlie make this face.
今度はそこの友人たちも連れて僕の研究室に来るといい。お茶菓子が余っていてね、困っているんだ。
You shouldn't take sweets from a middle-aged man.
ケーキ放つのこらダメよそんな。すみません博士。
研究室は君が思うよりも気楽な場所だ。構わんよ、いつでも来なさい。
The voice and expression of the professor as he said that. If he hadn't been carrying that bag in both hands, he would have sounded no different from a kind old man. Which was why Mary felt relieved. Her heart stopped quivering as much.
ありがとうございます。でもシャーリーの表情は陰ったままで、私は気になってしまう。こんな顔をしたシャーリーを見るのはずいぶん久しぶりだと思って。
君がこの部屋へ来るのは
And who's that?
随分と久方ぶりな気がするね。その後変わりないかい、聡明なクラリス。
And who's Clarice? Is she supposed to be Clarice or what?
はい教授。
So he's speaking with her, but her name isn't Clarice.
あれ
Why is he calling her Clarice?
私先週もお邪魔しました。そんなに久しぶりじゃないと思います。
Mary tilted her head. The man and the professor seemed to smile slightly at her words. Purple smoke drifted out of the latest engine-made pipe. It made the room a little whiter, but Mary didn't mind the fumes that much. The light smoke of the Royal College's 11th office. She attended special supplementary lectures here a few times a week. There wasn't anything particularly wrong with her grades. She was getting plenty of credits. Last year, when she was still a first year, this old man personally invited her. His fields of study were mathematics and astronomy, but not history. But the two of them got along, so the lessons continued.
エンジン革命の恩恵を受けた我が英国は未だ大いなる発展と繁栄の途上にある。1週間といえども多大な時間だよ。メアリ・クラリッサ・クリスティ君。
Oh, so Clarissa is her second name, huh? Mary Clarissa Christie. Oh, she's blushing. How cute.
多大だなんて大げさなんですね。いつもの通り。
私は追いさらばえた身だがね。君たち若者にはやはり多大な時間だ。少し見ないだけで君たちは着実に大人になってしまう。
でもいつまでも子供でいたら困ってしまいます。
そうかな。
The professor smiled again. He chose his words quietly.
このロンドンおよび英国の発展は早い。第4タワーブリッジも建造を終え、第2ビッグベントでも名付けるのかな。
An engine tower.
またメガエンジンを作るのですか。
Mega engine.
イーストサイドをエンジン工場群で埋めてから排煙の量は増加し続けているのに。
人は発展から逃れられない。明日へと続く道を外れるのが怖いのだ。
でも蒸気病の患者も増えてしまいます。
しかりカダス地方の交流と技術的および文化的影響は計り知れない。カダスの重大な社会的問題である蒸気病のロンドン発症例が発見されてなお政府は方針の変換を打ち出せずにいる。
Steam poisoning, huh?
なぜだかわかるかい、クラリッサ。
カダス的発展の利点を考えると手放すには惜しい。
しかりだがすでに我らが大英帝国は欧州と世界の覇者となるまでに至った。
But the ruler of the world, you wish.
エンジン革命によるエンジン兵器軍は軍事力を、都市型メガエンジンとエンジン工場は産業の力を。
City type mega engines.
しかし海と川は廃液によってよどみと化して空は永久の灰色に埋め尽くされた。エンジン塩害はとどまることがない。 エンジンによる発展が続く限り永遠に空は美しい色を見せない。
そう、年老いた人たちは言う空のこと。かつて空は灰煙の灰色ではなくて美しい色をしていたのですって。
So that weren't clouds. That was smog.
私たちはそれを知らない。色が濃くなったのはわかる。あと隙間のことも。この1年で見えるようになった現象。空の隙間とわずかな日差し。でもそれ以外のこととなるとわからない。
クラリッサ、君は美しい空を目にしたいと思ったことはあるだろうか。
私は思います。だってクリスタルパレスの隙間があんなに美しいのだから。本当の空はどれほどなんだろうってシャーリーも言っていました。陰った横顔を私は思い出す。シャーリー。
おやクラリッサ、表情が優れないようだね。何か心配事でもあるのだろうか。
少し友達のことで。そして講義を3つ終えた後、夕刻。そうだ、2人とも今晩は時間あるかしら。実はね、カモの良いのが手に入れられたってドナから珍しくエンジン音の連絡があったの。よかったら晩餐を一緒にいかが？行くシャーリーのお家久しぶり。アーシェはあまり来ていないものね。じゃあ精一杯おもてなしさせていただくわ。
Mary tilted her head on the inside. Charlie's expression was back to normal. The three of them met in the courtyard as usual. Then, just before they started heading home, Charlie made an unthinkable suggestion. Mary was surprised. Why is it so unthinkable? Bright, soft, as if the dark expression she'd seen earlier hadn't actually happened. And an invitation to dinner with her. She hadn't done such a thing in months.
何かいいことでもあったのかしら。そうなの。明日は土曜だからお酒もどうぞ。クラレットならメアリも行けるわね。ええ、強いワインでなければ大丈夫。
Shouldn't drink alcohol, it makes you old.
アーシェはとってもお酒が好きよ。
What?
クラレットワインも大好
You
き。
surely don't look like that.
残念。あなたはすぐ酔いつぶれちゃうからダメ。酔いつぶれるところを人に見せてはね。アーシェは特製のパンチで我慢なさいな。本当にまるで宣告は夢だったみたいで。
From the Royal College, Charlie's house was 20 to 30 minutes away on foot. 5 minutes using a toll gurney. What is a toll gurney? A mansion lay in the same borough as the college. The Bronte family mansion. The main house was in Gatwick, not London. It was much bigger, so this was just a villa. When Mary was young, before she moved to Wales, she came to play at this mansion a lot. The two of them often ran through the gardens. That was why she felt so nostalgic whenever she saw it. It hadn't changed at all since then. The Brontes hadn't boarded their ancestors' pet for its construction, so it had some peculiarities from a few decades ago. It hadn't changed, not the gates, nor the garden as seen from the outside.
でも随分と雰囲気は変わったかな。ご家族は本邸にいらっしゃるから、ここには今シャーリーとドナだけ。
Who's Donna anyway?
お邪魔します。ようこそおいでくださいました。メアリ様。
That is Donna.
アシェリカ様。
Her maid, I guess.
ただいまドナ。急なお願いでごめんなさいね。お帰りなさいませ、シャーロットお嬢様。晩餐の準備は整っております。ごきげんようドナ。今晩はお邪魔しますね。はい、メアリ様。
Donna bowed once. Mary realized that she'd finally become used to seeing that. Charlie had stayed in London next to the college when the Brontes moved back to the main house. Donna was responsible for her. There was no Donna back then, there was Donna's mother instead. Mary remembered her as a pretty woman, a kind maid in charge of babysitting. They had similar faces despite being different people, so at first she got them mixed up a lot.
でもようやく慣れた。メイドのドナ、お屋敷のプロフェッショナル。
As the middle class would say, a caretaker. She cleaned the mansion, made the beds, cooked the food and even did repairs. A professional housekeeper. That was why she couldn't help but respect her. Even as the rise of Adaism increased the job opportunities for women every second, she fulfilled all of these roles by herself. She thought that was extraordinary, thus Mary respected her. At the very least, compared to herself, who wasted half the day cooking whenever she tried. Compared to herself, who wasted half the day cleaning her room whenever she tried. She was impressed by people who could do things she couldn't. She was even envious.
あ、メイドさんだ。メアリー、ここメイドさんがいるよ。前に会ったでしょ。迎えに来た時、玄関先で一度。そうだっけ？それにあなた、マーシェ、別段メイドが珍しいこともないわよね。もううち出て1年は過ぎてるもの。1年も経てば見慣れないものなのだわ。
Oh, you left your house? Where are you living then? In a school dormitory?
そういうもの？そういうもの。立ち話をお続けになるのかしら？さ、中へどうぞ。ダイニングへ行っていいかしら？
Or maybe she's living at her boyfriend's place with this Howard guy, wherever that is.
お嬢様。
It wasn't quite the same as Charlie's, but Donna guided them with her own softness. They entered the dining hall. How long had it been since they ate dinner here? Looks like some high-class food.
そう、美味しい？
There's an ass
よ
on
か
the
った、
table.
喜んでくれて。ドナの料理はプディングもおすすめなの。たくさん召し上がってね。
I guess it's bread. They drank tea together often, but it'd been a while since they'd eaten together. Mary and Charlie were reunited 2 years ago, and they met Angie 1 year ago. The two of them used to eat together often, even after it became 3 of them. But the last few months, Charlie had stopped spending evenings with them. She kept saying she'd made plans already. Mary hadn't asked why. Charlie would tell her if she needed to. Maybe she has a boyfriend.
ドナ、鴨のローストもプディングも美味しいよ。
I don't see any pudding on the table. Or is that supposed to be the pudding?
ですって、ドナ。よかったわね。ありがとうございます。生牡蠣もアーシェ好きなんだ。ワインなくても全然美味しい。
Oh, is that the shellfish?
アーシェはたくさん食べてくれるから大好きよ。遠慮してはダメよ。
Angie seemed shy around Donna at first, but once she started eating, she went back to her usual bright self, as if she hadn't been raised on aristocrat food. She didn't try to hide her honest opinion of the meal. When they first met, she spoke infrequently and had a harsh look, but now she'd opened up and kept on talking.
おいしい。メアリはもうお腹いっぱい？相変わらず食は細いまま？ちゃんといただきました。たくさんね。アーシェが食べ盛りすぎるの。あら、ケーキはもっとたくさんいけるのに？そんなこと。
Oh, does that imply that Mary likes cake?
そう？アーシェはケーキも好きよ。でもカモも好き。
Oh no, I think that's supposed to be the duck. Then where is the shellfish? Oh, isn't that the shellfish?
アーシェがうちの子ならよかったのに、たくさん食べてもらえるとドナも喜ぶの。私も嬉しいし。貴族のご令嬢というよりイーストエンドのやんちゃな男の子ね。アーシェったら食いしん坊。そうね。でもこんなに可愛い男の子はいないわ。そう言ってシャーリーは微笑む。いつもみたい。
Yes, nothing had changed. The same calm, kind Charlie as always. That was why Mary almost forgot about her anxiety earlier that day, when Charlie's expression darkened. She might also have been a little drunk, since she wasn't used to claret wine. They say claret's popularity had declined since the 19th century, but recently it shown signs of becoming popular with women again.
クラレット、透明な色をしたワイン。ワインは少し苦手。美味しいけれど酔ってしまうから。メアリー、クラレットが進んでるわね。気に入って。飲み口が良くてつい。かのシャーロック・ホームズが好んでいらっしゃるのと同じ銘柄が手に入ったの。美味しいわ。でもやっぱり少し酔っちゃう。いいのよ。 よかったら泊まっていっても。急に悪いわ。課題もあるから今日は帰ります。あらあら、本当にメアリはワインに弱いのね。言ったじゃない。晩餐を終えてしばらくおしゃべりをして夜も更け。
And I guess I stop the recording here for today. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.